Yo, 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 yo. Anyone got a yo-yo? Not me. Hi everyone, welcome to Lit Film Fest Classrooms. It's week 5. This week we'll be looking at narrative writing. Well, what's a narrative? It gives us dialogue, which we've already been looking at, but also description and inner thoughts and what happens, and what the characters can see, hear and smell. A lot of their thoughts, but also describes where they are and where they're going to. And for our week 5 challenges this week, we'll be learning how to make our narrative writing really come to life. We'll be planning, drafting and editing, and then we'll be recording a narrative as a voiceover for our 5th instalment of our adventure story. If you don't have a clue what's going on, well, it's because you probably haven't seen the last 4 weeks worth of videos. Check out the link below for those videos to help you get up to speed. You've got 4 weeks worth of stuff to do. Right. Calm it down, Tim. Calm it down. Pipe down now. It's time to read chapter 4 of our Eldorado book. And while we read this, I'd like you to be thinking about what makes this a good narrative. So what are the features of a good narrative? And maybe just take ideas or jot some ideas down just as we read this chapter together. Chapter 4. Captured. Alone in the dingy prison cell inside Barbossa's pirate ship, Solomon heard the key turn in the lock. Someone had arrived at the door with the hush of a floating cloud. Solomon did not move his body. His eyes and ears were on red alert, yet his body remained in the same position, sat on the floor facing the door, knees to his chest, arms around his knees. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. The heavy, wooden door creaked open with a slowness that suggested extreme caution. Squinting, a head peered around it, avoiding the pale sunlight squeezing through the tiny window. A small person, the size of a young boy, entered Solomon's cell. The person put a finger to a closed mouth and beckoned Solomon to stand and follow. He did. Deep in the belly of the ship, it was even darker than his cell. 10 paces away, a candle flickered its last flame on a table full of nautical maps. Solomon tiptoed after the barefooted person, past a cabin full of snoring pirates, up a wooden ladder, past the empty galley kitchen, and through the food storeroom when the person suddenly stopped, turned, and faced Solomon. The finger returned to the closed mouth, and Solomon suddenly realised that the mouth belonged to a young woman. She was black-skinned, with large brown eyes, full of intense, piercing concentration. Finally, they were up on deck. It was early. The morning sunlight was sneaking its way through the distant trees, and onto a rocky headland surrounded by sand and silence. Using a rope, they carefully lowered themselves from the ship into the clear Caribbean water. It was 20 strokes to the trees, 20 strokes to a hiding place, 20 strokes to the beginning of freedom. Later that day, somewhere in the Colombian bush, Solomon, who was by this time starving, was treated to a meal like nothing he had ever experienced before. Blam poopernickel! I never knew slugs could taste so good! Slug juice oozed from Solomon's mouth and dripped down his chin. Absolutely delicious. I love the crunchy head. I can't get enough of it. And when you suck the eyes, they taste like toffee. Yum. Well done, biaho. Biaho was the name of Solomon's liberator. She pushed her slug to one side. She was inconsolable, sitting in the dirt, lost in a jungle far from home. Solomon tried to revive her spirits again. Oh, cheer up. I have something to show you that will help us find where we are. Solomon produced the map given to him by Columbus. Excited, animated, obsessed, he told her the story of Columbus's challenge, about Louis, about El Dorado, and about being drugged and imprisoned by the notorious pirate Barbossa. In return, Solomon asked Biaho her story. How had she found herself on the same ship, thousands of miles from home? Biaho took a deep breath and began with teary eyes. The same Barbossa, who tricked you, captured my entire village, and sold us to a slave trader. She painfully recounted how more than 200 of her people were herded like cattle into the hold of a large ship, placed side by side and locked into position by chains with no space to move and no room to stand. I wished I was dead, she admitted. I just had to sit and watch my people suffer. The woman sat next to me was terribly ill. She could not eat, she could not drink. She just stopped living. I counted 41 nights, she said. 41 nights of being chained to a wooden bench, 41 nights of tears. Solomon heard about the dead bodies being thrown overboard into the ocean. He heard that Biaho, who was the princess of her tribe, constantly talked to her people and tried to keep them alive by praying to their gods. It was a desperate tale of woe, which shocked Solomon to his core. "Come with me to El Dorado," Solomon said. "I will look after you. Our nightmare is over now, and we can both now begin to live again." 2 weeks later, Solomon and Biaho stood staring at a hill rising majestically above them. "Biaho," Solomon whispered, checking his map. "We've only gone and made it to the lost city of gold." Immediately, something else caught his attention. 2 other people, a man and a woman, stood directly to his right, staring at a map. The man turned his head and locked eyes with Solomon. "Maroon, gumback, feathers! I don't believe it!" spluttered Solomon. "You'll never beat me, Clegg!" bellowed the man in a Spanish accent. So what made that a good narrative? What were some of the features that you spotted in that tale? I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it. Off you go, off you pop. Don't pop. 30 seconds after this pop. 3, 2, 1. Now by now you're probably spotting some of those super sentences that we've been looking at over the past few weeks. They definitely make a good narrative because they change how you write, they change the style that you write. But they're not the only way to write a good narrative. A good narrative takes into account the setting and the suspense. It builds tension in the story and then relieves it very quickly. So we have at the start there Solomon creeping through the ship. It's silent. We're afraid that they're going to wake up any of the pirates at any time. That's what builds tension. We also don't know at the start of this chapter who it is who is liberating, freeing Solomon. There's a bit of a mystery there, a bit of a hook that we often say when we write stories. So when you're writing your narrative, maybe think about what the hook is. What are the mysteries that you haven't yet solved? And that could be, who is this person? Or what's in their pocket? Sometimes you see this on TV programs as well. And we also have that about Luis Jimenez as well. He has a secret weapon, we're told that in the story. So not giving the reader lots of information all at once is a great thing to have in your narrative. Building suspension is another. Also using those super sentences to describe thoughts and feelings and also senses is a really good way of writing an excellent narrative. There are lots of other features. We're not going to look into all of them. Thinking about how to start a sentence is a great one. So you saw a few cheeky time connectives in our story today, like later that day. And also we have finally they were up on deck. So having a nice time connective to start, or time opener to start your sentence, is a really great way to just write a bit creatively and also tells us when the story is happening or when that paragraph is happening. So now it's time to plan the next part of your story. You'll be thinking about reaching your destination and what you find at it finally. But there's a problem, and this is going to create a lot of tension in your story. Now in our El Dorado story, we're going to have our detectives finally reach the lake that holds the city of gold. But they find a strange man, very strange man, at the top of the mountain. And here's what he says. Take it away, old strange man.
There was no city of gold. It was a rumor that had spread like a game of Chinese whispers. At Lake Guatavita hundreds of years ago, an ancient tribe would throw small pieces of gold into the water to worship the sun. They chose gold because it was the same color as the sun. This is what the Europeans like Solomon Clegg and Luis Jimenez had heard about. Solomon Clegg couldn't have stolen a city of gold because there never was a city of gold.
So they've reached the city of gold, but it's just a lake. There's no gold left, and what a shame. And that creates an anti-climax there, which is really important in the story, because in the next few weeks you'll be creating a climax where actually you'll have a huge action sequence to finish off your story based off the back of this huge lie or this falsehood or whatever you want to happen in your story. So the first thing that we did in order to help us write this story was to really research where this is. So our destination is Lake Guatavita, and we've done some research in order to describe it, but also talk about some of its features as well. So knowing that the lake is circular and about a mile in diameter helps us to write about it. There's a ritual conducted there that's the basis for the legend of El Dorado. So again, we've done our research knowing that El Dorado should be there, and it's quite an interesting place. Knowing that it can get quite hot and sunny at the lake is useful because it's really high up, but because it's really high up, it's because of its altitude, being over 300 meters above the sea, we know it can get quite cold and also rain quite a lot. And also the air is very thin, which makes it hard for people to breathe. So again, our characters, when they actually get to the summit, to the peak, might be able to find it difficult to breathe. The scene might start with it very sunny, but then actually it gets quite rainy partway through. And that's based on the science, the geography, our research, what we've conducted about this place. And that's exactly what we'd like you to do today. So your challenge is to research your destination. What's it going to be like? What's the weather going to be like? What are the effects on the characters? What's the area like? Can you describe it? And then we'd like you to plan your narrative paragraphs. Now you're going to be planning 4 paragraphs. And you can use your senses to plan these paragraphs as well, because it'll really focus on description here. So paragraph number 1. From last week, we're going to go from the Amazon to Lake Guatavita. What can our characters see as they start to approach the lake? What does this destination point look like? Again, I'll write simple words and phrases into there so that in tomorrow's lesson then we can start writing in full sentences. Our next paragraph is walking to the lake, and because our lake is at the top of a mountain, we know we're going to find it difficult to get up there, and particularly breathing, or the weather changes as well. And you might want to think about what your characters can hear. You can change any of these senses round if you want. If you want to have hearing in the first paragraph and seeing in the second, that's absolutely fine. But you might hear the sound of raindrops, fat raindrops coming down around the mountain around you, or you can hear the breathing of your compadres, your companions, slowly getting heavier as you approach the summit. Paragraph number 3. Our characters will hear the truth, the falsehood that there is no gold in El Dorado. How do they feel? What are their emotions about that? Are they crestfallen? We'd really like you to use incredible vocabulary when we're describing all of these things, but emotions and feelings are a great way to actually use appropriate vocabulary. So this would be a great one. This also gives you the chance to think, well, how are you going to disappoint your audience in a way to bring it into an anti-climax? So what's the lie that the characters are told here at this point, or what do they find on actually reaching the destination? Now our characters are going to go back to Cartagena, where they were kidnapped originally, and they're going to try and confront the kidnappers who sent them on this wild goose chase, or stop them trying to find out what this secret really was. And that's what the action sequence is going to be. What are our characters' thoughts at this point? How is that going to drive the story forward? Maybe they've worked out some part of the story that makes it all fit together. It must have been the Colombian government who kidnapped me in order for me not to find out the secret to El Dorado and the lies behind it. That would be a good twist, wouldn't it? And our group would then have to expose this lie to the whole world. That would be an interesting story. Please send in your notes and ideas on our Facebook page, Lit Film Fest Classrooms, on our Twitter, @LitFilmFest, on the old email, info@LitFilmFest. That's about it. Unless you could post any through my door as well. I like post. I like getting post. Here's my address on screen right now. Other than that, thank you so much. You've been a great audience. You've been a great audience. You've been a good camera. Well done, camera. Good work. Excellent. Good little camera. Who's a good little camera? Hey? Who's a good little camera? Oh, you are. Yes, you are. Don't get too excited now. Don't get too excited. No, stop.